The deep rumble of motorcycle engines shook the dusty windows of the Copper Ridge Roadhouse, a tough old tavern that stood like a fortress at the edge of the desert highway. Chrome glinted beneath the harsh sun, and rows of bikes filled the gravel lot while their riders gathered inside for the annual Brotherhood run, a tradition older than many of the men in the room. Before we continue, make sure to like, subscribe, and tell in the comments where you're watching from. The air was filled with the smell of leather, motor oil, and smoke drifting from the outdoor grill, and everything about the place warned that it wasn't meant for the timid. Scarred knuckles, patched vests, and eyes that had seen too much told the same story. These men earned respect through loyalty, sacrifice, and an unbreakable code only they understood. At the center sat Marcus Reaper Kane, a huge man with a reputation known across 3 states, his vest covered in patches from decades on the road. President of the Desert Snakes, a brotherhood formed through fire and blood, he wore gray in his beard and deep lines across his face like old roads. Reaper had survived prison, betrayal, and real wars, and believed nothing could truly shake him anymore. But that belief was about to break because of a desperate 7-year-old girl who would appear with terror in her eyes and words that would save his life. Inside, the roadhouse roared with rough laughter, clinking glasses, and old rock songs everyone knew. Reaper sat with his closest brothers, men who had ridden through hell beside him, as Lou, the longtime bartender, brought a new pitcher of beer and a bottle of whiskey. Lou poured Reaper's usual drink and slid it across the scarred table. Reaper reached for it, ready to toast the brothers they'd lost, when suddenly a small figure burst through the door. Conversation stopped. Heads turned. A little girl in a bright blue dress, her light brown hair cut short, her bare feet leaving dusty prints as she ran in, breathing hard and shaking with panic. She looked wildly out of place in this world of steel and leather, like a small bird stumbling into a den of wolves. Her name was Sophie Martinez, though no one knew it yet. For 2 weeks, she'd lived a nightmare. Her father vanished after his truck broke down on a lonely desert highway, and her mother, searching for him, left Sophie with a neighbor who turned out to be cruel. Locked in a shed and barely fed, Sophie escaped 3 days ago and survived on ditch water and scraps behind gas stations. Weak, scared, but incredibly observant. Just like her father had taught her, she noticed dangers others missed. Minutes before running inside, she had been hiding behind the dumpster searching for food when she saw a thin, twitchy man slip into the roadhouse's back entrance. Something about him set off every instinct she had learned on the streets. She crept to a cracked kitchen window and watched him pour a vial of something into a whiskey bottle, the same bottle she had seen the bartender carrying. She didn't know who the drink was for, but she knew someone was about to get hurt. She could have stayed hidden, but her father's voice echoed in her mind, reminding her that good people don't walk away when someone needs help. So she ran. She dashed inside, past stunned bikers, straight toward the biggest man in the room. "Don't drink that," she shouted, pointing at Reaper's glass with a trembling finger, her voice cracking with fear. Chaos erupted. Men stood, chairs scraped, confusion spread. But Reaper raised a hand, stopping everyone. Something in her eyes made him pause. She wasn't seeking attention. She was trying to save him. Dirt covered her face. Her dress was torn. Her knees scraped, but she stood there shaking with courage. In a calm, low voice, he asked her why. Sophie rushed through her story, what she saw, what the man did, the vial, the bottle, the tattoo on his neck that looked like a scorpion. Reaper recognized the description instantly. Danny Vickers, a rejected prospect who had made threats after being kicked out months ago. They thought he was just angry talk. They were wrong. Reaper stared at the whiskey, then at the child who had risked everything to warn him. He ordered Lou to get the drink tested and locked the place down. The roadhouse jumped into action. Brothers secured exits, called contacts, and retrieved the bottle as evidence. Sheriff Tom Harris arrived within minutes, understood the situation, and called in a hazmat team. Testing showed the whiskey had enough antifreeze to kill Reaper twice over, its sweetness hidden by the burn of alcohol. Danny had planned the perfect murder, but Sophie had destroyed that plan. Police found him 3 hours later at a motel, packing to run. Evidence was overwhelming. He confessed quickly, admitting he wanted revenge and thought killing Reaper would prove he was tough enough. Instead, he earned 20 years in prison. When the chaos settled, Reaper knelt beside Sophie as she sat shaking in a chair, exhausted after everything she had pushed herself to do. He gently asked her name, Sophie Martinez, and listened as she explained her story in broken pieces. Her missing father, the cruel neighbor, her escape, the hunger, the fear. Reaper listened to every word, his heart growing heavier with each detail. Then he stood and addressed his brothers with a voice full of emotion. This little girl had saved his life, risking everything for a stranger, showing more courage than many grown men. The response from the desert snakes was instant. These men, so often judged by outsiders, understood loyalty and debt better than most. Within an hour, they mobilized their contacts, law enforcement, social services, private investigators, rescue teams. Finding Sophie's missing father became their mission, their promise, their way of repaying a debt they could never fully repay. Sophie was given real food for the first time in days. Juicy burgers, hot fries, fresh fruit that tasted magical after surviving on scraps. The bikers' wives and girlfriends soon arrived with clean clothes, a warm blanket, and gentle voices that made Sophie feel cared for in a way she hadn't felt in weeks. A doctor who rode with the club cleaned and treated her cuts, speaking to her about motorcycles and open roads to distract her from the sting of medicine. For the first time in what felt like forever, Sophie felt safe enough to let her guard down. She curled up in a booth and fell asleep, wrapped in a big leather jacket that smelled like smoke, freedom, and comfort, while the tough-looking bikers worked nonstop around her to find her dad. The search didn't take long. The club sent out a private helicopter from their emergency fund, and within hours, it spotted a broken-down truck hidden deep in a remote canyon miles from the highway. Miguel Martinez was found alive, hurt, dehydrated, and weak, but alive. He had broken his leg trying to fix the truck and had survived on rainwater and the small supplies he had, rationing everything while fearing no one would ever find him. When the rescuers told him his daughter had escaped, survived alone, and warned strangers to save a man's life, he broke down in tears. 2 days later, Sophie rode to the county hospital on the back of Reaper's huge Harley. At first she was terrified, clinging tightly to him as the engine thundered beneath her, but Reaper talked her through it softly, explaining how the bike worked and what the open road felt like. By the time they arrived, her oversized helmet was bouncing and she was smiling wider than she had in weeks. Miguel lay in a hospital bed, bruised and bandaged, but the moment Sophie ran into his arms, he held her tightly, sobbing with relief while she cried into his chest. Reaper watched from the doorway, something shifting deep inside him, something softening that he didn't know still existed. He had saved lives before, but this felt different, like he had been part of something pure and meaningful. The legal system moved quickly after that. The negligent neighbor was arrested and charged, and child services, with help from the club's legal contacts, ensured Miguel would keep custody once he recovered. The Desert Snakes created a fund to help the family, paying hospital bills, replacing the truck, and renting them a small house until Miguel could work again. They didn't see it as charity. They saw it as a debt of honor. On the day Miguel was released, the club held a gathering at the roadhouse. And this time Sophie walked through the door not frightened or lost, but as a guest of honor. She wore new clothes, her hair neatly brushed, and her father stood proud beside her on crutches. The bikers cheered loudly, lifting sodas and water. No whiskey anywhere in sight. Reaper surprised Sophie with a small leather vest, made just for her, stitched overnight by one of the brothers. On the back was a patch that read, "Honorary Member, Desert Snakes, Save the President." She slipped it on carefully, her tiny chin lifting with pride as the room erupted in applause. These rough, tattooed men treated her with a warmth and respect many people never receive in their whole lives. Years later, Sophie would tell her children this story. She would explain how paying attention saved a life, how speaking up even when scared changed everything, and how heroes don't always look the way you expect. She would show them the little vest framed on her wall and tell them about the day a small girl stopped a biker from drinking poison. She'd talk about trust, instincts, and the courage it takes to do the right thing when the world feels overwhelming. And Marcus Reaper Kane, who kept riding for 15 more years before retiring, always carried a photo in his wallet, a picture of Sophie sitting on his massive bike, helmet too big, laughing at the camera. On the back, in shaky handwriting, it said, "Thank you for listening. Love, Sophie." Reaper had faced rival gangs, prison riots, and near-death moments too many to count. But he always said the bravest thing he ever did was trust the warning of a 7-year-old girl. And the smartest thing he ever did was believe her. Thank you for listening to this story. If it reminded you to trust your instincts, speak up when something feels wrong, and never underestimate the courage of a small voice, share your thoughts. Tell us in the comments, what would you have done if you were in Sophie's place, alone, scared, and seeing something dangerous that everyone else missed?